So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining from. And welcome to this webinar on top announcements from Dreamforce 2022. So I was very fortunate to attend Dreamforce this year, and there were a number of exciting announcements which I thought would be beneficial for the broader community. So in collaboration with saasguru, I created this content which I'll be presenting over the next 45 minutes. A little bit about saasguru and myself, and then we'll talk about Dreamforce as an experience, as an attendee, how was the experience. We'll talk about top product announcement, top developer announcement, top architect announcement. There were some other announcements as well. And then we'll wrap it up with any questions and answers that people have. So moving on, I'll not spend too much time on it. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem since a long time. I've presented at a few conferences, including Dreamforce. This was my 9th Dreamforce as a speaker, and it was a really good experience as well. It was somewhat different because they had only 40,000 people this year. And when I say only 40,000, that sounds odd, but if you compare it with the 175,000 people that attended physically in 2019, it is like 1/5 or 1/4 of that proportion. So in that sense, it was less people, but it was still like a really good experience. I lead a Salesforce architect group in Jaipur, and I used to teach Salesforce for Trailblazer Academy. So I'm an ex-certified technical instructor. And the reason I'm here and the reason I'm on a saasguru webinar is I'm a part of their mission 100 Cross 100, which is 100 mentors devoting 100 hours of their time to educate the community and evangelize Salesforce. Okay, so moving on a little bit about what is saasguru. It is, first of all, not a dumps platform. It is a cert prep platform, and there is a clear distinction between the two. What saasguru does is, based on your assessment, based on your progress and performance, it creates a tailored path for you. And if you look at the interface, and I encourage you to go to the saasguru website and try things out, you'll see that it is basically a personalized learning experience similar to how Trailhead offers. And it is also gamified similar to how it is offered to Trailhead. The key distinction is that you actually have things like live classes here, one-on-one mentoring that you can request. You can actually request to be put on dummy projects as well. So those things are something which are a USP in saasguru. So the one thing which I want to clearly call out is saasguru actually complements Trailhead. So there are certain gaps in Trailhead, and that is exactly the reason why saasguru was formed, and that is exactly those gaps which saasguru fulfills. So things like benchmarking. So for example, you are giving a practice test, you're probably ending up with a score like 60 or 70%, and then you want to make sure that you are able to work on your weaker section. So it allows you to benchmark that. It is personalized. You can actually create your own study schedule. You can revise as per that schedule. You can do practice tests as per that schedule, and then you can reach out in Slack and then request a mentor for a one-on-one mentoring session. There are some benefits of being a part of the saasguru Slack community. Which is you can get certification vouchers from time to time. You can also get product updates and tips. So for example, they typically do release webinars as well. I'll shortly be doing one on winter 23 release. There are live classes and webinars that happen. And again, as I mentioned, there is a very active Slack community that is there to support you. And then there is the best part is like the gurus are from all over the world. So like you can pretty much get 24/7 support. So Akshay will post the link in terms of how you can join the saasguru Slack, and I would definitely recommend that you should join it to learn. So what was the Dreamforce experience like? So as I said, about 40,000 people in person, 150,000 watching on Salesforce Plus. There was a very strong focus on some of the new product offerings like Genie, Net Zero Marketplace, Mulesoft RPA, and others. There were dedicated tracks. This is something that Salesforce has done in the past as well, but there were new dedicated tracks which were introduced this year. So developer, architect, business, admin, these are usually there. Like there was a track for Slack, MuleSoft, Tableau, and several others as well. And again, the market is in a very I would say, tricky or uncertain situation, but there was a very clear and very strong message from Salesforce that the customer and the partner ecosystems are very, very strong. Salesforce as a company is on track to hit $50 billion in revenue, which is a massive number, and it is now the number one enterprise apps company in the world. And then the customer 360 vision is kind of the reimagined customer experience. So there was a lot of focus around customer 360 and how a lot of implementations are multi-cloud implementations revolving around customer 360. There was also a big focus on industries, which is something which I have not seen in the past. So for example, financial services, manufacturing, health and life sciences, each of them had their own zones, and a lot of announcements actually came out of the sessions happening in those zones. It was actually the 20th anniversary of Dreamforce, so they called it a family reunion, and it was like a celebration of sorts with that theme in mind. This was one of the most popular pictures which went viral, which was the co-CEOs of Salesforce dressed up as bunnies. Not often you see that, like it's in a typical corporate culture, but I think they pulled it off really well. So Mark Benioff and Brett Taylor, and this was when they introduced Genie as part of the keynote. And then there was a usual celebration and confetti, and again, as I said, 20th edition. So lots of feeling around celebration, and like again, the venue, which is Moscone Center, was decked up as in the typical Dreamforce colors. And then the best thing is there is actually Dreamforce 2023 date, which has already been announced. There is also Trailblazer DX happening in March 2023. And for those who are on this call, like these events are really, really special. I know it's very expensive to attend, but I'm hoping that at least for some of you, your companies would sponsor you, and may the visa gods be also kind on you, because it's very, very challenging to get a US visa at this time. So I'm hoping some of you end up going to Dreamforce 2023. So, okay, so the big product announcements, undoubtedly the biggest announcement that came out of Dreamforce was the launch of Salesforce Genie platform. There was also a lot of confusion around Genie because Salesforce already has a product called CDP. So how is Genie different from CDP? And in all fairness, like Salesforce did a decent job, and there are a lot of workshops happening around Genie, both in person are not happening in India, but in other parts of the world, and also virtual. So I'll also share some links around those workshops. But if you work for a Salesforce partner, like all the partners are being encouraged to kind of build competency on Genie. So how does it differ from CDP? Like there are 4 USPs of Genie, so to say. Like it is able to connect to real-time data streams. It is able to harmonize all the data. It is able to engage and interact with the rest of the offerings in Customer 360. And then the overall idea is that it can plug into any experience. It could be an Experience Cloud implementation. It could be a Salesforce app, which is built using mobile SDK. It could be something which has been published using mobile publisher. And the idea is that it is able to generate generate and fetch information in real time. So they actually did a mapping in terms of how it maps to Customer 360. And again, you'll see that those 4 key pillars, which I mentioned, it is real time, it is intelligent, it is automated, and it is also supporting Hyperforce. How does it does that? There are obviously, I'll have to go into a lot of detail, but at a very high level, like CDP had a concept of streams, segments, and activations, which is basically one of the core concepts in terms of customer data. It is intelligent because there is personalization that you can do using Einstein. You can actually build Einstein bots. You can use Einstein prediction builder. There is a lot of automation coming in as well. So obviously workflows, there is Mulesoft RPA, and then there is integration that you can do as well. And Hyperforce obviously is the data residency offering from Salesforce. So the idea is that if you have strict residency requirements that data should not leave a specific geography or the country, then you use something like Hyperforce to be compliant and deal with strict privacy rules. So the best part is they actually showed a couple of examples of how Genie is relevant to all the industries. And again, they are publishing case studies for literally all the industries. So in terms of verticals, like most of the major verticals like financial services, comms and media, consumer goods, health and life sciences, even public sector is covered. But again, to be very realistic, a lot of it is actually on the roadmap. So some of this is already available. As I said, Genie enablement workshops are happening, but a lot of it is also what they typically call it as coming in future as well. So you may ask, like, what is the difference between Genie and CDP? And especially if you have worked on CDP, then learning Genie is not that difficult of a product, or not that difficult of a learning curve for you. So the idea is that it's a revamped version, or they also call it as an evolution of CDP. There is obviously, so one of the limitations of CDP was that it was not built for scale. And typically when you get into a large data volume or an LDV consideration, especially with Hyperforce coming in, you typically require that your project should be able to scale. So that was one of the limitations with CDP, which has been improved in Genie. They call it the hyperscale data platform, and then it has its own relational store, which allows you to store extra data as well. It's a real-time platform. So for example, one of the things which was highlighted a lot in terms of how Genie is different from CDP was there is now a connector with Snowflake. So if you are using Snowflake as a data lake, or any other data lake for matter, you're using Databricks or any other data lake for that matter, then you can actually ingest that particular data, calculate insights, and then trigger actions based on that data, all in real time. So typically earlier, how it used to work was you used to get data into Salesforce, and then you needed to do these operations. So that bottleneck has now been removed. Again, the best part is it is actually built on an open platform, which is also in AI language called Bring Your Own Model, with tools like AWS SageMaker. You could use other AI tools as well. And you could also use like Bring Your Own Data Warehouse. It could be Google BigQuery, it could be Snowflake, it could be Databricks, it could be anything else. So these are some of the enhancements. So there was a lot of confusion also around how is Salesforce Genie different from Customer 360, because like it's also showing Customer 360 on the screen. So what is it that Genie adds? So Genie is essentially the real-time component where basically you are able to unite data across all interactions, and it ties into Customer 360. And Customer 360 is what Salesforce calls as the mechanism to create these customer experiences in a multi-cloud environment. So Customer 360 by itself is not real-time. Genie is what adds the real-time component. And you may ask, like, what is the difference between the Salesforce core platform and Salesforce Genie? So again, Salesforce core platform was, you had the CRM and you were able to do a number of things with it. But again, when it came to multi-cloud and real-time, it had some limitations. So Genie now allows you to store like billions and billions of records because there is a non-relational database running behind it. Most importantly, you are able to unify this into a unified customer profile, or what we also call in multi-cloud environments is global party ID in some cases. You're also able to ingest data and make profile updates in real time. So that is again a key feature. And if I were to sum up, like it's a unified profile, you offer a B2C scale, the data is real time, and then there is bidirectional connectivity across all touch points. So if you are not familiar with CDP, this is what it looked like earlier. Like you were able to create streams, connect to a specific stream. For example, here it's showing like between Marketing Cloud and the core platform, what is happening. This on the right was how the interface in terms of engagement looked like. So for example, you can see here, like we are calculating some insights. We are calculating like the engagement score for that subscriber. We have that engagement history across service, marketing, loyalty, and web. Genie takes this further by making all this data real time. So it need not be static in case you are using Genie. One of the other big announcements, and I'll cover some of the product announcements earlier, and then we'll come to the developer announcement. So one of the other big announcements was the Net Zero Marketplace. If you just go to Google and search for Net Zero Marketplace, you will see that this store is now live and it is available. So what is the idea behind this? You can actually find and purchase carbon credits. There is a very strong focus on companies becoming carbon neutral, that they are not producing more carbon and harming the environment. So in fact, even today, like Mark Benioff has tweeted out in support of initiatives like this and supporting the environment. So this is the overall idea. There is this product called Net Zero Cloud, which was earlier called as Sustainability Cloud, which is actually picking up a lot. Like if you see like certain sectors like sustainability in manufacturing, in retail, in consumer goods, that product is making a lot of good inroads. So if you ever come across a project opportunity, I would recommend that this is a really good skill to have. And again, the sustainability cloud or the net zero cloud, there is an accreditation AP exam for it as well. So that is also a good one to do. So at Dreamforce, like again, there was a demo provided of some of the newer capabilities of Net Zero Cloud. And then Benioff reiterated the message that carbon, we need to do more to reduce the carbon footprint. So although there is a lot being done, but essentially we are not lowering the carbon footprint. It is just changing from one form to the other. And what we really need is we need to utilize things like carbon credits and bring it down. Some other big announcements around Slack. So they launched some features like you can now do video in huddles. Earlier huddles were audio only. So they actually demonstrated a live video huddle. If you see on top left, you will actually see Parker Harris was a part of this huddle. And then there are some minor cosmetic features like there are more emojis, reactions, stickers. You can now do multi-person screen sharing. Messages are in threads are now saved to channel. Nothing major. The other thing was like Slack Canvas. So if you use Quip, you know that Quip is collaborative. Like we could have like all the people on this call work on a Quip and nobody would be overwriting each other's changes. That is actually now possible on Slack as well. So you create something called a canvas and it is like just like a Quip document or a collaborative Google Sheet that you can use, and you can actually use that as part of Slack. Some of the other things that were there, which was, so Mulesoft RPA is another offering, which actually has been around for a long time now, but Salesforce kind of used Dreamforce as an opportunity to evangelize it a little bit more. And thank you, Gaurav, for posting the link to the Net Zero Marketplace. So again, the idea is that Salesforce with MuleSoft RPA is entering the hyper automation market segment. It is going after the likes of UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism. There is a lot of scope and a lot of traction in that market because, like with economic uncertainties, a lot of companies are opting to actually reduce manual costs, reduce human costs, and do things via bots and automation. So in that sense, again, it's a good product to learn. It works very similar to how tools like Flow Builder and some of the others do. I will actually show you a little bit more on MuleSoft RPA a little bit later. So I don't want to intimidate you with this architecture. Like this is the overall architecture of MuleSoft RPA. You can at a very high level just know that there are like multiple building blocks. So Composer is something which Salesforce has launched, which is the no-code way of doing integrations in MuleSoft. So if you don't want to write APIs using the Anypoint platform, then Composer actually has a lot of pre-built connectors that you can use. And then you can do integration with all of these. And there are about 26 or 28 of these available. Then in the middle, you see MuleSoft Automation Suite, which is MuleSoft RPA. So it has components like RPA Manager, RPA Recorder, RPA Builder. The core idea is that you build a bot using RPA Builder. You train it using RPA Recorder in terms of what activities it's supposed to perform. And then you are able to manage the execution of that bot using RPA Manager as well. So collectively, like it's a very strong offering. Now that you have like declarative capabilities, you can build API integrations using Anypoint platform, but there is also a lot that you can do without writing a single line of code. Let's talk about some of the top developer announcements now. So again, one of the biggest announcements was Salesforce DevOps Center, which has been in beta for a long time now. And the best part is that you actually have access to it. So if you go to Google, search for sign up Salesforce developer org, any new org that you get now actually has DevOps Center enabled. So if you just go to setup, go and type DevOps Center, there is this flag, which is by default not enabled. You can enable it. And then the idea is that instead of using external tools like Copado, Flossom, GearSet, or any others, you can actually use native DevOps Center capabilities for CI/CD. So I'm not suggesting we should stop using those tools, because each of those tools has some specific features which are not there in DevOps Center. So right now it's fairly basic in capabilities, but if all that you need is like core CI/CD and like build automation, then it's a really powerful tool. And I believe it is expected to go GA sometime later this year. And they also published a comprehensive roadmap in terms of how DevOps Center will evolve over the next 1 year. So definitely a good tool to look at if you are a developer. Another big announcement was Code Builder. If you have not heard about it, and if you have not seen this slide carefully, this is actually not my VS Code. This is my browser. So the overall idea of Code Builder is that you're able to run a fully functional, full-fledged IDE inside your browser. So you don't need to go to VS Code. You don't need a local machine. Obviously, again, this is still in a very early stage, but the idea is that anything that you can do, like type ahead, being able to use a CLI, being able to deploy using SFDX, everything you should be able to do using Code Builder as well. So some of the other things that Code Builder offers is, again, if you see on the left, like there is support for CLI. So anything that I can do by using the SFDX CLI in Code Builder in VS Code on my machine, I can do it in Code Builder as well. There is also type ahead, and which is available, which is obviously great. Again, as I said, this product is not live; it is still in beta, so not everything will work perfectly. But that is the idea, that they want to basically make development smoother and not tie it down to a local environment. So if you are a developer, you can no longer say it works on my machine, because everything is now going to run on browser. So you will probably not be able to use that excuse. Another big announcement was that if you are building LWC components, at least the way I and my team used to do to test them was that you go to Experience Builder, you publish it, and then you basically test them on the site itself. You use tools like Chrome browser, emulating an iPhone and an iPad, or you use like some other browser. So now the idea is that as part of development cycle, there is this SFDX simulator available, which actually allows you to test your components locally while you're building them. So if you change the payload here in the code, it will actually reflect in the mobile simulator on the left-hand side as well. So definitely a very time-saving and useful feature to use in future. DataWeave support in Apex. So this has been coming for a long time. Like it has something which is like, if you want to parse a CSV file in Apex, currently there is no straightforward way to do that. Like if I ask a developer, how do you want to do it? They will just go to Google. It will probably return like a GitHub link. They will use the code snippet from there, but that is not native support, and it is obviously performance intensive as well. So the idea of DataWeave is like typical file operations like CSV parsing or some of the other operations. DataWeave is actually a language which is heavily used in Mulesoft on the Anypoint platform, and that support is actually coming to Apex as well. And I think there have been a couple of recent blogs on the Salesforce developer blog. So go check them out if you're more curious about what DataWeave is and how will it impact you as a Salesforce developer. Another big thing, this is more from a developer and architect perspective. Like there is this new PubSub API, which was launched earlier this year. But again, Salesforce kind of used Dreamforce as an opportunity to kind of do a messaging around why you should use it. There is a very nice architect decision guide which talks about when you should use it and when you should not use it. So if you just search on Google for architect decision guides, Salesforce, it will take you to that link. But the idea is that the old PubSub API had performance issues, had scale issues, and then they've basically rewritten the whole thing using some of these, using the newer implementation. And the core concept remains the same. Salesforce functions, again, this is something which has been around for a very, very long time. The core concept is you're serverless. So rather than writing something which is executing on the server, you are now delegating that thing to happen in a function space. So rather than executing it on the server side, you delegate it to a function, you request the function returns a response, and then using invocable Apex, you can use whatever data you had in your application. It now supports multiple languages, Node, Java, and Python. And again, if you want to compare it with some of the other PaaS platforms like AWS and GCP, like AWS has a concept of Lambda functions, GCP has Google Cloud Functions. Salesforce was a late comer in this space, but again, functions implementation is decent. Like I've not seen a lot of functions implemented in my projects, but definitely it's on the rise. So again, if you are a Salesforce developer, definitely a skill that you want to learn. And again, the best part is like, if you have come from one of these backgrounds, like from JavaScript, Java, or Python, then it's very, very easy to invoke functions and call functions as well, and write functions as well. So again, as I said, the overall message on functions and DevOps Center is like what is also very popularly called as bring your own tool chain or bring your own stack. So the idea is that you don't need to write everything in Apex. You can actually write in whatever language you want, expose it in Salesforce functions, invoke it from your Salesforce. And then coupled with microservices and CDN, you can serve that to clients and build a high performance architecture. So CDN actually helps you avoid a lot of server-side hits. And then based on like whatever architecture you are choosing, you can build microservices for separate modules for each of these things. It could be internationalization, data, theming, routing, APIs, and so on and so forth. Let's talk about some of the top architect announcements. Again, the biggest announcement for architects was the launch of the well-architected framework. So this is something which Salesforce had earlier launched. It was called as SOGAF, which was named very, very similar to TOGAF, which is a very popular enterprise architecture pattern. But SOGAF had a lot of issues, so they kind of pulled it back and then relaunched the framework as well architected at Dreamforce. So the overall idea is again that there are a lot of you don't need to reinvent the wheel and build everything from scratch. There are a lot of things that you can do from whatever exists on the core platform. So like last year, Salesforce launched Salesforce diagrams. If you don't use this, then you are missing out on some really good architectural diagrams. There is also a very popular blog and architect site, which is architect.salesforce.com. This is where those decision guides are, which I referred earlier. And the core idea is the well-architected framework is 3 tenets like trusted, easy, and adaptable. They are actually doing a lot of well-architected workshops. So if you just search for Salesforce well-architected workshop, you will see that there is one offering called In a Box, which I think is a recording and a deck, but there are also a lot of workshops happening across multiple groups. Apex Hours also has a session on well-architected, so I would recommend if you should watch that. And the core idea is to make things a little bit more granular. So there is a new concept of user access policies, which is in addition to things like permission sets and permission sets groups. And the idea is that you are able to control things like sharing and security on a more granular level. Other announcement, like they formally announced Scale Center, like they already had this. Last year, they ran something called Scale Academy. So like if you are an architect like I am, and you typically work on LDV projects which are large and complex, then you know that you will run into issues. So the idea of Scale Academy and Scale Center is you learn some of the best practices when you're dealing with large data volumes. Salesforce diagrams, as I mentioned, like very, very easy to build out diagrams. You can actually take an existing diagram and then modify, and then the new PubSub API was another key announcement. And then they also showed examples in the keynote, like how you can actually do it for various verticals, like for example, financial services, again, depending on whether it's commercial banking, financial planning, personal lending, like they have some recommendations in terms of how you can package it up. So only if you're interested in FSC, then go look at it. Some of the other announcements, like if you come from a testing background, like there were significant enhancements announced for the UTAM framework, which is basically to do automation testing. So now it's a lot more comprehensive. Like again, the idea is that if you don't need to do everything via manual testing, you can actually build out automation test scripts and run them using test runner, and you can write UTAM. So some enhancements on this framework, which has existed from earlier. Some other announcements which I think are good to know. So industry focused Slack services. So earlier Slack was like a generic product, and now what they've also done is like, if you are playing in a specific vertical, whether that's financial services, whether that's health and life sciences, manufacturing, consumer goods, there are actually variants of Slack services that you can use. So for example, again, it's a combination of data model for that specific service and some workflows in Slack that have been pre-built for you. Another important announcement was that Slack there is something which they call as new Slack or Slack V2, which is basically they are doing a rewrite of the core Slack product line. So that is in open beta. If you just go to Google and search for Slack open beta, then you will see that it is something which is available and you can participate on it as well. There is also something called Hyperforce, which is, as I said, the data residency platform that Salesforce has. So that has been extended to new geographies now. So Middle East, specifically the Dubai region is one of them. Hyperforce is now in India as well. So that is again something which was announced at Dreamforce. And with that, I think that is the end of the presentation. So I'm hoping that you found this useful. So thank you for joining, and I'm hoping that this session was useful. Again, the idea was not to make you an expert on anything. I just wanted to share a few things which I saw at Dreamforce, and the idea is that you become curious and then you go on and do your own research on these. Okay, everyone. Bye-bye.